Could these potential signings be sneaky ads for the Leafs? We'll discuss this and much more coming up in this episode of Hattrick HQ. I'm Casey alongside my co-host Mark Pye, and let's get right into the video. The first topic of this video is, could these players be picked up by the Leafs? And in an article recently coming out by Joshua Cloak of The Athletic, said Maple Leafs free agent targets, 7 candidates from the bargain bin to consider. The first person we're going to talk about in this is Jesse Puljujarvi, who was a highly touted prospect at one point in his career, but now last year playing in Carolina and Edmonton, he only potted 2 points towards the end of the season with Carolina and 14 points in 58 games with Edmonton. Mark, what do you think about a potential Jesse Puljujarvi add to the Leafs?
Jesse Puljujarvi, I loved him when he came into the NHL, but what scares me is a guy like that not be able to really produce with Connor McDavid, who's the best player in the league, and Draisaitl. It kind of scares me if you pick him up in a role of hoping for offense. But he has a great two-way game. He's a checker. He can still finish when he needs to, but it's kind of one of those coin tosses that you might pick up when he's back, when he's healthy, and just hope for the best.
Well, yeah, Puljujarvi is more like a guy who you would sign to a 1-year deal now. He wants to prove himself. He's been in a bit of a slump the last couple of years. We know the skill is there. It was once there. So hopefully he can, if it's not by the Leafs, he'll get picked up for a year. I'm thinking around 1.5 million. Just prove his worth and prove that he belongs in the league.
No, I agree completely. If you can get him on a 1-year deal at maybe 750K or 1 million, and it's a contract if you need to bury in the AHL, you can, and I'm sure he'll play at that caliber for sure in your bottom six, and he's a guy you can plug into your top six as well.
Yeah, and the second player we're going to talk about today is Jonathan Toews. As we take a look at his stats here, obviously Jonathan Toews is a household name for everybody who watches hockey. Star for Team Canada, and he's played his whole career with the Chicago Blackhawks. And now at 35 years of age, he's coming towards the end of his career, but you could pick him up on a sneaky deal if he's thinking about coming back for another year, maybe trying to get another cup before retirement. But as we look at his stats here, last season through 53 games, he had 31 points. The year before, he had 71 games played with 37 points. Obviously, the point production isn't there as it once was, but if you can get this guy at a sneaky deal, you'd like to have him on your lineup.
No, I completely agree. At one point, I would have considered him the second best center in the league behind Sidney Crosby. He was always that defensive guy. It was him and Bergeron kind of going back and forth on who was the best defensive forward. He can still kind of produce. The previous injuries and his health scares and everything is something he does need to consider before he probably comes back to the NHL. But on the Leafs, if you put him in a fourth line role, I think it's incredible. He can probably play up to your third and in a pinch in your second. But the leadership, multiple Stanley Cups, he's just a locker room guy that I think every team in the league probably has called about and showed interest.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with these older guys, it's nice for them to come in, kind of prove that they can still play for another year, try to compete for a cup. We've seen it recently with Corey Perry, who has been playing phenomenal in the playoffs over the last couple of years. But like I said, the Leafs it'd be a great ad to have Jonathan Toews. If they could get him, obviously with the cap of the Toronto Maple Leafs, if they could get him at a cheaper rate, it'd be nice for him to come into lineup. And like you said, you kind of slot him into that third line role, and he plays say 50 games. That you'd be happy with that.
No, I completely agree. Especially the playoffs, you've seen him perform in the playoffs. He's a big time guy when it comes to crunch time minutes, and probably still one of the best penalty killers. So, I mean, if you can get him at a cheap deal and just plug him into your lineup, and like I said, the leadership is the biggest thing for me. You get a captain that's been with the same organization. I think you can really elevate the younger guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. As we get into the next guy we're going to talk about today, which is Zach Aston-Reese. Of course, most of you Toronto Maple Leafs fans will know him from last season, where he played 77 games and 14 points. What do you think, Mark, about adding Zach Aston-Reese back to the lineup for another year?
Zara was one of my favorite players last year. It's a guy you don't really notice him a lot of the time, but it's in a positive way because he doesn't make mistakes. He plays bigger than he is. He's a good two-way guy. He can pot an occasional goal, but if you have him as a fourth line guy, maybe Ryan Reeves comes out for a few games, you can slot him in. Or, if you wanted to put him on the third line just for more of a physicality, if you're playing someone like Boston in the playoffs, say. I think if you can get him back at a cheap cap hit and you might take a 1 year deal, I think he's the perfect ad for most teams as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you can get him back at a league minimum, Zach Aston-Reese is a phenomenal back checker. He always gets back and he's making plays in his defensive end. You look at 14 points and you're like, why the hell did this guy play 77 games? But it's the things you don't notice on the stat sheet that really pop for Zach Aston-Reese. And we'll get into
No,
our next player here, which is Ethan Bear. A lot of you guys might know this name as we get a look into his stats here. Ethan Bear, recently known for his time in Vancouver, playing 61 games with only 16 points, and in Carolina with 58 games and 14 points. What do you think about a potential Ethan Bear add to the Leafs?
with Ethan Bear, I don't think we really need another player on the back end like that. If I was thinking of more of a player for the Leafs to add, would be maybe a seventh D that could kind of rotate in with Giordano. But I think Ethan Bear is another guy. I'm surprised he hasn't been signed yet. But he's just a guy that you can plug in into your bottom four or your top four on your D pairings, and he'll produce. He's steady on defense, and once again, I think another team's going to pick him up very soon.
Yeah, I agree. And we're talking about like someone who's probably going to get 1.5, 1 million. And if you're going to get a guy for that cheap, you'd want to take the risk on Puljujarvi, who we talked about earlier. But like nothing against Ethan Bear, he's a phenomenal player. He's played well in Edmonton, and he's played well wherever he's been. He's a great defensive player. I think a player who's looking to prove his worth in the league, and I think if he can find a team where he fits into that bottom four, I think is a great fit for any team.
No, I agree. And like with the Leafs, they do have Connor Timmins as their seventh D right now. So he's another guy, you have him under control. So I think you just stick with him and run him as your seventh D and stay away from Ethan Bear at this point.
And we'll get into the last guy we're going to talk about today, who is Sam Gagner. Sam Gagner is a tenured vet in the NHL from London, Ontario, who's looking to come home potentially for a hometown cut at the league minimum. Again, another player who's getting up there at 33 years of age. Last year, he played in Winnipeg with 14 points, and the year before in Detroit, playing 81 games and potting 31 points. Mark, what do you think about having a hometown guy in Sam Gagner back in Toronto?
I mean, I love getting Ontario guys in Toronto. They show support. They love the city. They love the team. But another thing is with the Leafs' current bottom six, Sam Gagner is almost like the odd man out again. Be in a kind of situation where you can maybe have him as a healthy scratch, or bury him in the minors for a couple of games, and kind of like a Wayne Simmons treatment at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Sam Gagner is a guy who, he's from Toronto or from Ontario. So when he comes home to play in Toronto, he's going to play with everything he got. And, a bit younger than some of the guys you've talked about here today. But, when you get those guys back, they're just going to play their heart out and, they're just going to produce for the team.
No, I agree.
So, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. We'd like to hear your thoughts on these signings and who the Leafs should pick up. I've been Casey, along with my co-host Mark Pye. Keep your stick on the ice.